So I've got like a slides presentation and I've got a demonstration on a sort of Google sheet on how I do some pricing analysis and set prices, and then any questions can come in after that.
Okay. I'm gonna have you make you co-host in case, and then not only that, you should be able to share your screen if you need to.
How's your markets going at the moment, like in the Smokies and things of that nature? How's all that going? Any
Okay.
boots on the ground knowledge or experience that I can maybe benefit from knowing in terms of managing
Well,
your pricing?
I'm in Asheville, as I don't know if because you manage Tyler Kuhn's property there
Yeah,
as well. Hurricane Helene really hurt us. I think we canceled all of October, November, December, and then so we're just kind of scraping by to get different people there because the area was affected pretty bad. I was
yeah,
there recently, just lowered my prices drastically, I think, or I've done some promotions here and there just to try to get people in, but and then the
yeah.
Smokies, it's been okay. It's definitely slower than last year, so it's been a little disappointing. But when you go to the properties, it's there's hardly anyone here.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
the
I've
Smokies,
noticed
I
some
was
of
like,
the trend. Some of the trend, it's more like it seems like it's more severely affected like the real big properties. Yeah, like 5 and 6 bedrooms seem to be affected more so than the threes and fours. So the trend versus the same time last year is looking relatively similar over these next coming months. Obviously, the last few months were maybe where all the issues were, but hopefully it doesn't change too much.
I'm hoping this year is going to be a better year. We have a new president in place that's supposed to improve the economy. We'll see how that goes. And inflation's
Yeah.
definitely hurt the area, especially where my rentals are. It's very sensitive to any pricing issues just because of the demographics. So hopefully that things start turning around and our revenues starting improving here. So
Nice, nice. Sounds good.
I guess let's go ahead and officially start. Really excited for this meetup. We'll just have the replay up on our Facebook page and people can watch the replay. Today is really special because I have my revenue manager, Stephan Eagles, here with Mostly Booked. And we're going to talk a lot about revenue management because that's something that a lot of us, to be honest with you, don't master. There could be a lot of data. And most of us, to be honest with you, don't know what to do with the data. So that's why I wanted to bring Stephen on here. So, Stephen, thanks for coming on.
Hey, no problem at all. I've just gotten some slides to run through just to basically get everyone in the right frame of mind of looking at pricing the way we price listings for our clients. And then I'm going to get into showing you exactly how we look at the data, how we analyze the data. And if you follow the same advice, you can get results that most hosts don't get because they're obviously too busy being hosts and having to get pulled in many different directions. So if you just apply these few simple things, it should really help improve your results coming into 2025. So my promise to everyone watching today is I'm going to teach you how to price your listing like the 1% of hosts who actually know what they're doing so that you can earn more money in 2025 than you did in 2024. As Alex just mentioned, my name's Stephen. I'm the founder at Mostly Booked. We're a pricing agency for Airbnb hosts across the US, Alex being one of them. And I've been on a quest to try and solve the Rubik's Cube of pricing strategy for the past couple of years, trying to figure out what matters, what doesn't matter, what works, what doesn't. And we've made a lot of progress over these last few years, and we're getting really close to figuring it all out. So I want to share some of the key findings and the key takeaways that will maybe most help your portfolio today if I can. But we're going to start with looking at a lot of the problems that we've observed with most clients' accounts when we're looking at their Price Labs accounts. So I've got a nice picture of Jay-Z and his famous 99 problems there to highlight this issue, but we're only going to go through 3 of them. The first issue is that they rely too heavily on Price Labs' made up prices. We're going to look at the major problems with most hosts' Price Labs accounts that we've observed. 3 of the key reasons that we've observed would be that they rely too heavily on Price Labs' own made up prices. The next would be they're not making data-driven decisions. They're making decisions maybe just more on intuition or based on past experience, maybe. And the third major reason would be that they don't make lead time their ally, which is maybe a sort of key part of your pricing strategy that you really want to take on board for 2025, but we'll explore that a bit later. And because of these three reasons, the listing suffers in performance and they end up earning less money as a result. But today we're going to give you the solutions to these problems. And when you do all of the above, your listing will improve in performance and you're going to earn more money, guarantee. That's my big, bold claim. So we're going to look at how to stop relying on PriceLabs' own made up prices and actually take decisions into your own hands. We're going to look at how to make data-driven decisions, looking at things like final market occupancy and the trend of previous years so that we can make better educated guesses this year. And then we're going to look at how to make lead time your ally, which is something that a lot of people flush down the drain. So the first thing that we're going to do, though, is we're going to identify some of these problems in greater detail, just so that I can really drive them home. And the more that you're conscious of them and aware of them, you'll catch yourself in real time committing these mistakes. And then you'll be like, oh, that's the thing Stephen talked about. The first major problem would be relying too heavily on PriceLabs' own made up prices. So maybe you can relate to this, in that when most hosts are setting their prices up in PriceLabs for the first time, it asks you with their like pricing helping tool, it takes the number of bedrooms, let's say it's a 4-bedroom property, and then it's going to ask you, is it a mid-scale property or is it an upscale property? And then based on the option that you select, it will then, if you select mid-scale, for example, it's then going to auto forecast your next 12 months. Now, the big problem with this is that it pretty much does the same thing for a lot of the other 4-bedroom mid-scale properties. And so therefore, what ends up happening is everybody seems to get a very similar pricing strategy and everyone gets priced the same. So there's no unique advantage if you are just following PriceLabs' generic forecast, because it's not really taking in a lot of the specifics as it should, or maybe that's just as far as the software can go at this point. But it might work for you in the high demand periods, everybody being priced the same, where market occupancy is above 75%, let's say, because if everyone's priced at a high level and there's lots of demand, there's not necessarily an issue with everybody getting booked. But what we've found is as demand starts to shrink in the mid levels of demand and in the lower levels of demand, this is definitely not where you want to be priced like everybody else. It's obviously very competitive in the lowest levels of demand. And so you don't want to be priced like everyone else. You actually want to stand out so that you can get a competitive advantage over everybody else that maybe isn't aware of the fact that they're looking at dates that are in super low levels of demand. That would be the first major problem that we're seeing most hosts are making. The second problem would be most hosts aren't making data-driven decisions, so they're pricing more blindly. Most hosts will start with that sort of generic 12-month forecast and see how it goes. Maybe they're going to gradually reduce their rates. Can often be last minute, maybe if they remember or have got busy lives, and so it's always a little bit inconsistent and they're not necessarily leveraging the data or seeing how things are trending. The results can be, depending on the individual, can be a little bit random, whether that's good or bad, and they're definitely pricing in a way that's more reactive than proactive, I would say. But the good news is that most hosts are pricing their listings in this same way. They're letting PriceLabs come up with the forecast. They haven't necessarily got a system or a routine in place when it comes to pricing their listings. And even you having a basic system that I'm going to show you today is going to give you a big advantage over everybody that doesn't have any system at all. And one of the best ways that we're going to do this is by utilizing the data better than other hosts do. So one of the examples I can give here is, like, imagine this year you're going to have 120 really hard to sell dates this year, and we can learn from last year's data that they're going to finish on less than 30% market occupancy. So it's like super competitive. Maybe only the best hosts get booked in these moments, or those who are the most proactive with their pricing and recognize that these are really hard to sell dates, and so they're the ones that get booked. Now, I also want you to imagine, out of those 120 dates that are going to happen again this year. Last year, let's say you only sold 20 of them. So you only sold 20 out of 120. That is very common when we observe most clients' Price Labs accounts before joining us. They perform quite well in the highest levels of occupancy. But when market occupancy really drops off a cliff in the low season or mid-season, mid-weeks, let's say, they really struggle. Selling 20 out of 120 dates leads to, during the lowest periods of demand, leads to less booking frequency, less five-star reviews, which leads to fewer bookings. And I'm sure most hosts have been in situations where they don't get booked in a couple of weeks and everything starts to spiral in a negative way, as well as being the complete opposite when things are going, when you've got booking momentum and the bookings are just absolutely flying in. That's the side that we want to be on as often as possible. And so the best way to do this is by looking at the data, knowing these 120 really hard to sell dates in advance, pricing nice and conservatively with these dates in advance before any other host has got their shit together, and getting a nice head start on them. And that's going to allow you to have more of a consistent, mostly booked calendar, let's say, throughout the year. And you're not going to have that big drop off in terms of like search visibility because you haven't been booked in weeks and things of that nature. This is probably one of the biggest things that we see most hosts struggle with, is keeping consistent throughout the low and mid seasons. But I'm going to show you how to identify all of these problem dates, these 120 dates, let's say, in the example that I've used today. But yeah, the key takeaway here is don't neglect the lower end of your ADRs. They're not necessarily beneath you. They're a necessary part of your pricing strategy, because the reason I say that is there are a few hosts out there who will maybe not drop their price to a certain point. Now, of course, it has to make financial sense in terms of it has to be worth their while, but it is part of a greater overall strategy. Not only does selling your lowest demand dates keep that consistent flow of income throughout the low season, etc., but as you're getting those bookings and those 5-star reviews, let's say in January, when guests are searching for your May, June, July, August, September dates, you're going to get increased visibility across all dates. So it's actually helping you sell on the highest levels of demand as well as the lowest levels of demand. So yeah, just make sure to take that seriously would be the big takeaway there.
Is that just tricking the algorithm there at that point? Because you're getting bookings, right? Because Airbnb would probably promote you. I guess it makes sense, right? Airbnb promotes hosts that are getting bookings.
Exactly, yeah. And the minute that you stop getting bookings, everything like drops off a cliff, and then you really struggle, and then it's about lowering your price to get that first booking again. It's like any kind of content, or if you hear the cries of any YouTuber maybe who's getting certain amounts of views on their videos and then they stop posting for a week or two, and then those next few videos are going to absolutely bomb until the algorithm starts to like them again, or maybe any Instagram feed or any Facebook feed. It's the same things. You always want to enable that level of consistency wherever you can, and long gaps in your calendar are really detrimental to your search visibility. And the last and final problem that I'm going to cover in this training would be that most hosts aren't making lead time their ally. So I've just spoken there about identifying your hardest to sell dates, especially during low and mid-season, and most hosts relying on Price Labs' generic forecast, which sort of prices everyone at the same prices, and then everybody probably maybe reacts at the same time as well, in terms of when panic sets in and they go, oh, my February midweeks are all looking a little bit rubbish there. I should probably think about dropping those. Today is like the 23rd of January, so that would not be the best time to do that. Ideally, you want to be making these decisions when you've got as much lead time on your side as humanly possible. The analogy that I would use here is like the easiest way to win a 100-meter race would be to start 50 meters ahead. So it's don't start at the same starting point as everyone else in terms of maybe only dropping your prices 1 to 2 months out, trying to fill occupancy. You want to do it with 6, 7, 8, 9 months on your side, so that you've got this huge advantage on them, so that when everybody else dropping the rates last minute, you've got all of this extended lead time on your side. So for all guests who are searching for I don't know, we're in January now, so let's say a midweek in November that's notoriously really quiet. You're going to want to have your prices set for there right now in a really conservative way. And so what that means is for anybody that's searching for, I don't know, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, you've got all of that sort of promotion period where all of your competitors' rates are inflated because most people have this sort of I price high far out model, and they're not necessarily basing it on, yeah, but what did that midweek in November finish on last year from an occupancy point of view, and not knowing, oh wow, that's actually going to be a real struggle. And so you're going to gain all of this promotion period, let's say, where obviously Airbnb would push you to the top of the search results. So for anybody searching for those dates, if everyone else has got super inflated prices and that's a really hard to sell midweek, and you bring your prices down to a realistic level whilst they're all hyperinflated just because they're not proactive and they're not organized, they'll eventually bring their prices down to the exact same level as yours. Then you've got all of that sort of window to help sell those dates as like a competitive advantage against everybody else. This is one of the key things that we've noticed with a lot of our clients' accounts, where we had the audacity or the bravery to basically not follow the herd and to go, okay, we would be really happy if we could sell X amount of midweeks through our low season at these kind of prices. That would be great for us, and we're just going to ignore what everybody else is doing. And it really makes the difference in terms of keeping that consistency throughout the low and mid season. I think one of the key takeaways from this, which I'm going to show you in the next slides, is just going to be having the confidence to identify which are going to be your hardest to sell dates, looking at the kind of ADRs that have worked for you in the past, and then pricing at those ADRs with sort of confidence far out. And it should really help a lot of people as they're going into the low and mid seasons. Obviously, that's different for everybody. Some might be in it right now in January, February, but you can definitely get a head start on the likes of your Novembers and maybe your first couple of weeks in Decembers if that's a sort of low season period for you as well. So that would be the last of my three major issues that we're going to cover today. And before I start demonstrating to you how we're basically going to do this, we're going to download the data from sort of Price Labs, and then we're going to do a little bit of formatting and things of that nature so that we can properly look at the data and make decisions with it. Just want to quickly run through a little bit of Pricing Philosophy 101 with you. I want you to ideally get into the habit of looking at your prices through the lens of risk and probability. Our goal with pricing is to increase the probability of selling nights and reduce the risk of leaving nights empty. And the right pricing decision comes down to understanding the levels of demand and then applying the appropriate amount of risk to that demand. Where demand is really low, let's say less than 30%, the risk of not selling those dates is really high. Okay. And so what we want to do is use our price point to bring down the level of risk and increase the probability that we are going to sell those dates. So the extreme example would be, let's say in the lowest levels of demand, you reduced your rate down to $1 per night. The probability of selling that date would probably go to 100%, and the risk of not selling that date would probably come down to zero because everybody would book it at $1 a night, even during low season. And that's obviously an extreme example and not practical, and we're not going to do that. But it's just to demonstrate how to look at things through risk and probability. So there's going to be a sweet spot in terms of risk and probability, and you need to ask yourself, when you're pricing your listings, let's say your midweeks and the lowest levels of demand, what is the probability realistically that I'm going to sell all of those dates at that kind of price point? And then you want to keep bringing that price point down to a level where you're like, okay, the probability here is quite high and I'm happy with that if I could get it at that rate. So we want to find that sweet spot. And then on the opposite end, we've got the highest levels of demand. That is where our risk is at its lowest. It's like there's so many people searching for these dates. This is where we can take more risk and increase our ADR and try to really stretch maybe what our listing has earned before. And it's far less risky to do. Obviously, I think with observing most hosts' accounts, they tend to have this more generalized approach. They're not necessarily knowing which are my high risk dates and which are my low risk dates. And Price Labs is just doing its thing on all of them. What we're going to go through today is I'm going to teach you how to look at the data, identify these dates so that you can identify which are my high demand, low risk dates and which are my low demand, high risk dates. And then you can apply the appropriate level of risk and probability to those dates. Just to wrap up these slides, because you're going to get far more value if I just demonstrate how we actually go about doing all of this. Some of the key takeaways I would say to think about would be to stop relying on Price Labs' own forecast. If you find yourself doing that, you're definitely leaving money on the table. So their pricing model basically just applies to everyone, all of your competitors. You want to sort of take control of that and build more of a custom strategy for your properties, making data-driven decisions and not guesses, because again, it leads to losses in revenue. You want to be utilizing final market occupancy and the trend column so that you can make better decisions. But I'm going to show you how we do that, because we don't find that using Price Labs' little graph tool is very, not very practical. Certainly when you've got to make lots of pricing decisions, because the minute you move it from left to right, you don't see the data from the dates either side of it. I'm going to show you how we do that. You want to make sure that lead time is your new secret weapon. The earlier that you optimize your prices, the more visibility you're going to gain, and the higher your chances are going to be of selling your most hardest to sell dates. And then risk versus probability. You need to understand when to play it safe and when to take risk based on market demand levels. So in the lowest levels of demand, you want to have really conservative pricing. And in the highest levels of demand, that's where you can be confident to try and push for new ADRs that you've not achieved before. Okay, and now I'm going to show you how to go about implementing. Any questions on that so far at all, or is that all good?
No, I think once we start seeing the example, because I think I had to come to this Jesus moment where my ADR, I was like, I wasn't willing to drop it at this point, but at the end, I wasn't going to make any money. And to drop it that low, that far in advance, and it was like, you're not going to get booked at that price.
Yeah.
So, and I think talking to you about it, my thing is at the end of the year, you want to make $100,000. Why are you fighting over this like $20 or in the middle of the week or whatever it is? But at the end of the day, I just wanted to make a good amount of gross revenue for the year.
Yep. And then you find that it all actually helps you sell those mid-demand dates, high-demand dates, so it serves its purpose in that regard as well. And also when you look at the volume of what those low ADRs actually maybe amount to over a 12-month period, it can maybe surprise certain, people in terms of what it can add to your overall revenue as well.
And in the end, I was slashing prices anyway. I was trying to give away 30-40% discounts to get someone in when if I would have dropped it 20%, 25% earlier, I probably would have gotten people to get booked earlier. And then all of a sudden, there's nobody coming up to the area. They're already booked. So.
That's it, yeah. So it's just having that confidence to be the first to undercut everybody else, because you look at everyone else's 4 bedrooms and then you go, well, my property is better than theirs, so I'm not going to go below them. But everyone's just freestyle and making it up, and then everyone's just at this hyperinflated price that no one's ever going to book at anyway. And so, yeah, it's having that confidence to go, okay, what would be great for my property in terms of revenue? And when you can identify the lowest levels of demand, it'll probably give you more confidence, actually. I'll demonstrate it now to make these decisions, because you know how competitive it is. So can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm just going to try and hide this floating panel though, because it's in my way.
You were able to download this data from, anyone could do this from Price Labs, or was this
so this is the end result, but it definitely doesn't look like this when you download it from Price Labs. So when you download it from Price Labs, thankfully, what I've done is I've pre-recorded a video that I'm going to give to your audience, which basically teaches them how to download it from Price Labs and how to get that end result that I've currently got there. So when you download this file from Price Labs, that's what it actually looks like. which is super ugly, big column widths, doesn't really make much sense, just lots of numbers. And for me, I'm a very visual person. I find myself just squinting at the data and not really knowing what it means and confusing me. I've basically recorded a video here that I can... Do you want me to send you it after this ends? Maybe I can share the link and you can send it to everybody. But I'm basically teaching everybody in this video how to download it from neighborhood data, and then basically how I take it from this to this here. So yeah, so everything's a little bit more condensed, makes a bit more sense. So effectively what we've got now here is every day of the year for this year, and we can see what is the occupancy right now. We can see what was it last year today. And so therefore we can see the difference in terms of same time last year trend. So this is up by 11%. This is down by -7%. This is down by -15%. And we can see what did it actually finish on as well, so that we can get an understanding of maybe how much occupancy might be left. Then, of course, we can see all of the different percentiles, prices. We can see what our current price is. And then we can see what did we achieve last year? What do we already have on the books this year in terms of new bookings? And then we can see any holidays and events in this column. Being able to see the data like this in this kind of view is super important to going through the sort of our main pricing philosophy that we use. So what we have here, I'm going to share this file with everybody as well, by the way, so that they can use the video training that I've created here to download their own files, and then they can utilize this template here to basically put in their own data. And so what I've got here is a very mini analysis sheet. We do something that's far more comprehensive than this, but trying to make this as practical for the average host that's maybe also got a full-time job and is super busy or whatever. What we do here is we're breaking things down into occupancy categories. So 0 to 33% is considered like critical level of market occupancy. They're the hard to sell dates that we just spoken about that we want to get a head start on with lots of lead time, etc. Then you've got like more of the mid levels of demand, let's say between 34 and 66%. And then we've got the higher levels of demand, 67 right the way up to 99, potentially even goes to 100. Don't know why I stopped at 99. I just wanted to break it into thirds, I think. But what we can do is we can start here, and then what we want to do is start looking at how our listing performs in these various levels of market occupancy. So in this final occupancy column, which should say final occupancy, we are going to look at specifically is between 0 and 33% market occupancy. So now we can see all of the dates throughout the year that fall into these critical levels of market occupancy for every single month. Now we've got this huge advantage over everybody that just believes, I don't know, May is considered like quite a healthy month. They wouldn't necessarily expect that there's certain days within May that are going to be a really tough sell. Their May forecast might have everything priced between $400 and $500 a night, but little do they know there are 10 dates in May that are going to be much harder to sell than the other 20 odd. That goes for every month throughout the year. So straight away, we've gained a lot of clarity on knowing which are going to be our hardest to sell nights throughout the year. And then what we're going to do, okay, so we can scroll through and see exactly how many dates there are this year that fall into this kind of category. So as you can see, there's 180 dates in total. So in terms of available dates, I'm going to put in here. And then I'm going to look at how many did we sell last year for these same dates. You would go into this old ADR column here and just drag all the way up. Okay. And then we can go, whoops, just let me quickly remove something on my screen. I think because somebody's just joined, something's popped up. Okay. So we've got 88 nights sold in total with an ADR of 279. Okay, 88 nights sold with an ADR of 279. Okay, and then you can even put the kind of percentile that your listing most often fell into as well to give yourself an idea of where you were at. An ADR of 279, you simply just need to click this column and then we need to take the average. Okay, so the average there is 328. So that's a little bit higher than we are. What if we were to choose the 50th percentile? That's 253. We're somewhere in between the 50th and 75th on average in these levels of occupancy in terms of what we achieved last year. We're not 50th, we're not 75th. So maybe let's put like 62nd, okay, to say we're like somewhere in between. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing for the next occupancy increment, 34 to 66. So is between 34 and 66. And then I'm going to go and see how many dates are there in total this year. Okay, we got 18 in total. Okay, and then how many of those 100 did we sell? We sold 104 with a 428 ADR. Okay, so that's 88 out of 180 days is nowhere near as good as 104 out of 118. So as you can see, as market demand is increasing, this listing is having no trouble in selling those dates. But in the lowest levels of demand, of course, it struggles, and a lot do. To be fair, that number is probably quite good in comparison to a lot of hosts' accounts that I've seen. Normally, this sold item here would be much lower than this. Okay, and then our ADR of 428, we just need to know where about that positions us. Looks like it's about 75th. Yeah, so we could maybe say it's just slightly higher than 75th. You could either, just to keep your life nice and easy, just put 75th, or you can be like 77th or something, just so you know, okay, I'm always slightly above 75th. Okay, and then last but not least, we're just going to do this for the 60, what have we got, 67 to 99. And what this should give everybody is just a lot more clarity over what their listing does in various levels of demand, because as we're going to analyze in a second, it often changes as market occupancy changes. So here, strangely, there's only 46 cases of high levels of demand for this client's listing, which is very strange. Normally this is back to front, but some markets are a little bit strange and different. And then we can look at the ADR was 573 with 39 sold. 573 with 39 sold. Okay, and then 573, what kind of percentile position are we occupying? It's not 90th, it's definitely not 75th, it's closer to 90th. Okay, so maybe we might see, let's just put like 85th or something like that. And so what we can analyze now from these findings is how this client's percentile position changes based on the levels of market demand. So when market demand is nice and strong and high, the selling like 39 out of 46 is a really good ratio. They've only had 7 unsold. As you can see, the ADR increases significantly and they're occupying almost 90th percentile. However, on the very extreme opposite, they're having to climb all the way down to percentile when market demand is in these low levels here, and they're only selling 88 out of 180. So just less than half they're selling in the lowest levels of demand. And the key takeaway that you can take from that is certain hosts will believe that I am a 75th percentile listing or I am a 90th percentile listing based on what they believe the quality of their listing to be in terms of the amenities, the interior design, etc. And they will occupy that position. So they'll price their listing throughout the year and they'll maybe just stay in this really upper percentile category, let's say, and refuse to come down even as market demand really drops. It's almost like potentially a bit of an ego thing, potentially, or a pride thing, I don't know. But what you want to do is know that as market demand drops throughout the year, you need to fluctuate between the percentiles because you know it gets super hyper competitive down here. And so what happens is if you've proven that you are actually an 85th percentile listing, and then you drop your price down to, let's say you dropped it to 50th percentile, the entire market, when they are searching for dates in this occupancy increment, will recognize, wow, that's a really nice listing at that price. Then that means that all of the other 50th percentile listings get booked last because you're actually an 85th listing coming down to 50th. So you're making their life much harder and you're getting like front of the queue in terms of getting booked first. So This is the real advantage as well, just on a side note, to having going above and beyond with your interior design and your amenities, etc. Because if you can be a 90th list and work your way up there in terms of quality, and then have the freedom to navigate up and down the percentile scale, then even in the lowest levels of demand, you can maintain a mostly booked calendar, providing you are prepared to bring your ADR down to a sort of suitable level to whatever that is. So as we can see here, when looking at this client's account, I'm not going to be too concerned by what's happening in these sort of highest levels of demand. I think the most critical thing to focus on here, which will actually help these as well, would be to solve this problem of achieving less than 50% in terms of conversions here. So what we're going to want to do is go, okay, if they achieved only 88 out of 180 dates in this occupancy sort of category with an ADR of 279, then straight away I'm thinking, okay, I want to get this 88 out of 180 to, let's say, 120 out of 180, 140 out of 180. And to do that, I'm going to have to bring this number down. And so let's say in my earlier crazy example, if I brought this number down to $10 a night, I would probably sell all 180 of these dates. But of course, we don't want to do that. You're going to want to navigate with this with you can do it incrementally. You could try, okay, this year, if I could do it at 249, if I could make my ADR 249, that's only going to increase the volume of nights sold here. And you could do a little bit of basic math going, if I sold 120 nights at 249, what would the difference be between selling 88 at 279, and make sure that it makes sense? But then you could be like, okay, what if I brought it down to 239? When we talked earlier about the risk and probability, getting this number to 130, 140, 150 will mean bringing down that price point, because then the probability of selling more of them goes significantly up. So you might want to go, okay, I'm going to bring this down to 239. And if I sold 140 of these, what would that look like in terms of difference in revenue? So you can just do a little bit of basic maths to figure that out. I'm sure you will actually find that it makes a great deal of sense and you can make a lot more money by doing it. So that's the main thing that we would, or that I would focus on in all of this, a little bit of practical application. Let's go and focus specifically on those really hard to sell dates. And then we've got January, February, March, etc. And we wanted to achieve an ADR. In fact, we might even put a new ADR, a desired sort of ADR that we're going to maybe run with. Let's say we were going to go more along the 249 as our new target, and hoping that might get us into the 100, 110, 120 nights sold. Obviously, if you decrease that lower, you're going to increase the number that you see in here. Obviously, January, February prices here right now are already priced pretty low to where we would have them. But basically, what you would be wanting to do is you want to be looking at the old booking column here to what you achieved last year. Now, unfortunately, when you're downloading data from PriceLabs' neighborhood data, it's not giving you the information about lead time, which is really annoying. It's something that we have as a pricing agency because we're tapped into there. But in this example, they don't provide it, which is really annoying, because that would be able to tell you how far out did these 218s come, so you can know if they were a result of slashing your prices last minute or if they were achieved further out. But as you can see for this client's account here, we've got a lot of these set to 190s to help sell a sort of higher volume this time around. But you would basically just work month by month. You would look at the level of final occupancy and say, okay, that's even in the 0 to 33 category, that's more like nothing goes above 18% there. They're like super dire levels of market occupancy. And then you can make a decision on the kind of percentile position that you said you were going to occupy. So if we've said that we're more like 62nd percentile last time overall, we can look at what is slightly higher than the 50th, but what is less than the 75th. We could take the average of these numbers here, for example. Let's say we wanted to look at this Friday and Saturday. We could say, okay, what would be the sweet spot in terms of being in between those? And we've got 235 going on there. but then we can obviously make a decision to come down slightly less than that or not, depending on what we believe. As you can see there, they've already actually got a 4-day booking at 229s there, so we wouldn't worry too much about that. But maybe this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday here, we could look at that position here to the sweet spot there, and then we can make a decision if we want to come down closer to the 50th to increase the probability that we actually sell those dates. Because also remember that this 62nd percentile and this ADR of 279 is just the average. So there's going to be moments where they've achieved rates that are higher than that, and there's going to be moments where they've achieved rates that were lower than that. So you've got to make a judgment call when you're analyzing the data where it's got like final occupancy 11%, 8%, 10%. That's like really dire. And so your probability, your risk is super high. The probability of you getting booked is super low. And so you pretty much need to be looking at those dates thinking they're going to be mission impossible to sell. And so I need to be getting myself in that kind of mindset of going, am I happy to let them walk away empty and not sell whatsoever? Or could I go with a price point that maybe like these 218s here or these 217s that I achieved last year or these 202s, looking at the sort of the hardest to sell ones. And I want to make sure that I've got my prices set to that kind of rate now in a way that makes sense to me. You would literally just walk through each of your months. You would say, okay, I sold there's 10 dates in January. Last year, I sold 4 of those dates at this kind of ADR. And then you can make a decision to actually lower your ADR month by month. And then eventually you can feed all of that into your analysis and say, okay, did we achieve an ADR of 249 there? And you can maybe make some increases or decreases so that overall it achieves that sort of ADR, if that makes sense, not to confuse people too much. So basically you work on a more isolated fashion for each month. So you're looking at how many nights available, how many nights did we sell last year? Okay, if I want to sell a higher volume of those dates, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that I didn't sell last year, I'm probably going to have to come down on this 218 to sell a higher volume of them. So then maybe that's probably why these are at 190s here now that these 229s have come in, to try and sell a higher volume of those dates, because then that would be a success for that month. Then you would do exactly the same thing month by month. If you look at February here in the 0 to 33 category, there are pretty much the entire month of February falls into that occupancy increment. So February is like a real struggling month. Okay, so that's going to be a really important one to get right. Other than President's Day, Valentine's sort of weekend there, which they've already been booked across 4 nights instead of 3 nights versus last year. And they've got a booking that's already come in here. This is going to be a real struggle this month. If you really wanted to, you could, just to make life a bit clearer and simpler, you could just select all of those dates in February. So you're looking at this specifically. You could maybe even potentially filter specifically by Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays as well, so that you can, obviously you're going to achieve a different ADR maybe on your midweeks than you would a weekend. So you might want to treat them separately and go, okay, let's go with some nice conservative prices here. Again, you could do a very similar exercise. How many nights were available in total? There's 12. How many nights did we sell last year? We sold 6, so we sold only half of the inventory there, and at a price point of around 214 was the average. If we want to sell a higher volume of them this year, we probably want to bring that 214 down to maybe 199. And if we've identified ourselves as a 62nd percentile listing in this kind of occupancy range, then we know that if we drop down to 50th, our probability of getting booked goes up, because we're slightly higher in quality than 50th. We're actually more like 85th, I think we worked out earlier. So now our probability of getting booked goes up. So what you could actually do is you can copy and paste all of the 50th percentile prices, and then you can look at that versus your historic bookings and go, okay, does that make sense? Yes or no? Actually, I still think I'm going to shoot for these 217s here, and I still think I'm going to shoot for these 224s that I achieved here. And all of the rest, cool, because I didn't get any bookings there anyway, let's say. And then that's how you can very quickly arrive at the sort of prices that you want to set for these. Or you can do it manually and just say, hey, I'm happy with $200 a night on all of these dates. Then you can by all means go for that. But that's how I would break it down. And then you could look at your long weekends, let's say Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then look to do a similar thing. And then you can be like, okay, what did we achieve last year in terms of how many? We had an ADR of 285, we sold 6, and there are a total of 15. Okay, so that's not a good average. Okay, so we definitely need to be thinking about bringing the ADR down this time around from this sort of 285 average. That will be skewed a little bit by these events going on, but then we can look at, okay, what is the sweet spot between these numbers, which would put us about the 62nd, which we know we can get booked at. And then we need to make a judgment call on, do we believe this level of market occupancy is high enough that we should stick with 62nd, or because it's 17%, or here it's 16% and it's trending 7% worse, so it's not even going to finish on 16% this year, we might make a judgment call there to drop down into 50th to increase our probability to basically counteract the fact that it's trending worse. So then we can make a judgment call on that and maybe bring our price down there to sort of 195. It's already very close anyway. It's already very close to that price point anyway. But let's just say that we were maybe sitting at 234s or whatever you might be sitting at. Then you can make a judgment call on that. And then you would take your next sort of weekend there that's going on with these kind of occupancy increments. Obviously, things are trending negatively. You can see what they finished on. You can see what you achieved last year. Maybe just a Friday, Saturday booking was achieved there last year, but it's trending a bit worse this year. And then you can see, if we get the average there and keep that highlighted, we can see that the middle point there would be 238. The middle point there would be 245, 231. So you can get an average of where you should be priced. So let me just add, I don't know, 10% onto that to make it, or 15% maybe is probably about right. And then drag that down across those dates. Okay, so maybe that's about the 62nd percentile. And then we can make a judgment call based on this level of trend. Is this a moment where I want to hold my ground and go, yeah, I think that price is fair and I want to shoot for that? Or do I believe I'm going to end up not selling these dates and this becomes another year where I only sell 6 out of the available 15? So it's all about looking at things through risk and probability. And then you're just going to do this exact exercise through each month of the year. And I know it's a little bit extensive. Some of you might have multiple properties, 5 to 10 properties or whatever, and it is extensive. But you've got to think, if you're, let's say you work your way into all the way through to November, let's say you just done a couple of months each week. So just focus on working your way through, I don't know, March, April, May, and then have a breather. And then in a couple of weeks, focus on doing, I don't know, September, October, and November. Like identify all of your low and mid season months maybe as your priority, and just work your way through making these pricing decisions, mapping everything out, and then installing them bit by bit. And you're going to be far more ahead of everybody else that's not looking at the data. They don't know that this Thursday, the 13th in November, finishes on 13% market occupancy, and they're going to be sitting at a high price like 443 when they've got no business having a price of 443 and it's never going to sell. So it's pretty much just sitting there going to waste. And then if you work your way through this incrementally, you'll eventually arrive at a place where you've got everything mapped out and everything is based on what is happening in the market. I think I should maybe stop talking and put across to any questions you might have, because I'm all talked out. Yeah.
No, it's a extremely good illustration. I remember when I first saw this and I realized, oh crap, you need to get off your high horse, because you're right. Like a lot of times you'll consider yourself a 75th percentile listing and you won't ever move off of that. But in the end, you wind up losing money. And so you really do need to drop your prices just so that way going down to, for me personally, to be honest with you, I wouldn't like, especially the very difficult ones to get booked. I wouldn't even mind going down to the 25th percentile because at the end of the day, that kind of helps your listing get more bookings in the more premium days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and the just the last thing to mention there as well, you mentioned people not wanting to jump down from being a 75th percentile listing if that's what they believe they are during the highest levels of demand. What can sometimes happen, and this stopped us from doing this strategy for a while, is that look at these 275s that were achieved here. So what will happen is throughout the year, even in the lowest levels of occupancy, you can get like a bit of a freak far out booking where someone will book at a high inflated price because the guest didn't necessarily know that this is going to be a really low demand week, and they were just, oh, I really like this property, and they book it. And then what happens is most hosts will see this one-off achieved ADR of 275, and so that's what encourages them to keep all of their prices inflated. Let's say if these were all like 299s a night across every night, because they've achieved 275 once, they will then opt with that as a, that's going to be my kind of minimum far out price, because sometimes every now and then I achieve those bookings, but those are like rare one-off occasions. And actually, if you were to bring this down to 229 per night, you would actually sell all of these and you would actually make more money as a
Yeah.
result as well. Another reason why people maybe need to have confidence to not only drop the price point, but what to do when you encounter a bit of a freak booking. Like this could even say 349, for example, and then you're going to find yourself in a predicament where you're like, so these were all like 190s and 200s, but then this one was 349 and there's nothing in particular happening here. So it leaves you a little bit snookered thinking, oof, it makes it hard to make that decision. But what you need to realize is all of these dates throughout an entire 12-month period, if you focus on going with a more conservative ADR or a more conservative price point, then you're going to sell a higher volume overall throughout the year. It's going to give you that consistency versus having this inflated prices because every now and then you get a 349, but they're so few and far in between. And when you look at the analysis, I'm hoping that most people will be shocked what the difference is they see here. So how many nights were available in the lowest levels of occupancy and how many did they sell? Oftentimes I see this number looking more like this. That's with most clients that come on board with us, and most hosts don't need to worry about that issue that I've just spoken about there. Yeah, I would say that's the main takeaway, is to focus on the sort of lowest levels of demand, and I think that will help most people. I haven't necessarily got time to teach the opposite end, but then the opposite would also be true, right? You would go looking at all of your dates. Let's just bring all of these into play. You would filter by market occupancy is between, what did we say, 67 and 99. So these are your highest demand dates where you would take more risk. And then exactly the same thing, you can work through month by month, knowing that the ADR that you can ask for in March is going to be very different to the ADR that you can maybe ask for in July, even though it's going to be in a similar percentile position. So if we're saying 85th is our sort of average, then we can go through and make judgment calls on all of the dates in March and decide, okay, these 480s and these 390s here, how many of them did we sell? Is this a case of us wanting to sell a higher volume of them? You'll probably find in the highest levels of occupancy, volume isn't going to be an issue. This is where it's going to be focusing on, can we push for higher ADRs? And oftentimes the best way to do this is by leading with maybe a very common ADR amount that you've achieved that was the maybe sweet spot, and focusing on pricing in that way right now. So if we were to go 481s, let's say on all of these dates, I'm not saying that you should do this, and where these are like 500s, we also brought these down to 481s because we believe that's our sweet spot. All of these here, let's just get rid of that one. We've probably got a higher chance of selling more of them at that price point. So oftentimes what people will do is have this really highly inflated sort of ADR. But what you should look to ideally do is learn from months that maybe are very similar. So if March, April, and May are maybe similar months, and then June, July, and August are very similar months in terms of ADR, you can learn, what were the average here is like 600s, 599s, 699s, 699s, 635. So like mid 600s is my sweet spot for June, July, and August. And then you can say, okay, what about March, April, and May? What is my sweet spot there? Oh, maybe it's like mid 500s. And then if you price them in the mid 500s with more lead time on your side this time, because bearing in mind in the past you've probably had highly inflated ADRs and then you've brought your price down as the check-in day gets nearer, and then whatever you get, now you get the benefit of going with those, let's say, mid 500s with a lot of lead time on your side. You're going to have a greater chance of getting more bookings at that ADR. So overall you're going to maximize your ADR, increase bookings at those sorts of rates as well.
Yeah, a lot to go over. Heck, shows you that the reason why I hired you. I was like, it's just way too much for one person to go over. And if you, like you said, if you just trust Price Labs and you're doing everything what all the other hosts are, you're gonna wind up failing.
Exactly that.
Stephen, we're over on time. We could probably do this for a while too. Maybe let's talk a little bit about Mostly Booked and how people can use some of your services.
Yep, sure. We're helping mostly US clients actually at the moment, and yeah, we've got quite a lot going on at the moment. We basically just look after clients' accounts for them entirely. A lot of the things that I've mentioned there, and a lot of things that we used to do behind the scenes for our clients as well. So we basically just set up your 12-month pricing strategy. We do all of the data analysis there that I've spoken about, and then we manage clients' accounts on a sort of weekly basis. So we're looking at all of the trend and how things are changing, and we're setting the initial 12-month forecast and then adjusting on a weekly basis and helping them maximize their revenue with a lot that I've just mentioned there.
Yeah, Iris was asking, do you have any more tutorials for revenue management? I attended like a 3-day boot camp that Stephen put on, and it's significant amount of training that goes on. To be honest with you, went way over my head. And that's why I just said, I'm just going to hire this guy.
Yeah. So in terms of tutorials, I don't know if that means, I don't know, a call to maybe run through your specific situation and see if it's for you or not. We definitely do that, yeah. So maybe I can provide a link to that with Alex after the call, maybe, or something like that. And there was just one last question from Corey, is the fear of attracting poor quality guests, which makes it more scary to rent your property out at that price. That's definitely a valid concern. I guess my argument would have to be that, let's say there's going to be certain locations where it is very difficult because more certain locations just have more of a bad rep in terms of attracting poor quality guests, let's say. But by and large, what you should look to do is put the systems in place that most mitigate having issues with guests as you possibly can, in terms of like your screening process and things of that nature, to try and fend them off. Maybe even having a minimum night stay of like 2s and 3s during those midweek low demand dates as well as anything else you want to put in place, like damage deposits and things of that nature. There's a lot of tips and tricks out there on how to mitigate against that. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's the smart decision overall to miss out on all of those benefits in terms of being frequently booked and a lot more 5-star reviews. I would definitely say more revenue. It helps sell your higher demand dates as well. I think overall as a strategy, you'll definitely win with that approach. But I do appreciate certain markets, your location or your listing might be in a location where there's no way I can do that. So only you're going to know maybe as low as you basically want to go. Like, I'm not going to go below $200 a night because I know for a fact that I'm going to get like the worst kind of guess with that. Okay, work your way up from that. Whatever that moment is, just work your way up from that. Maybe that'd be the last thing to say on that.
7:10 here Pacific Standard Time. Stephen, how can people get a hold of you?
You can just head to book.com. If anyone wants to speak with us, they can do so through there. I think there's like a contact us button there that they can jump on. But I'm also on Facebook, which is where I communicate with most of my clients, Stephan Eagles. So yeah, I've got a lot of sort of Airbnb contacts and friends on there. So feel free to add me on there if you want to keep in touch as well.
I'll have this replay up on the Facebook page and also share you the replay. Give me a couple days and I'll have it posted. With that said, we'll go ahead and end the meeting here. Okay, guys.